You know, Madison says this. He says, the executive branch is that branch most prone to go to war. Therefore, we specifically delegated that and gave it to the legislature. With regard to general legislation, Montesquieu, who many of the founding fathers looked to, said that when the executive presumes to legislate, that a form of tyranny ensues. The whole idea was to separate the powers. In fact, it's one of the things that is just primary and fundamental about our constitutional republic is the checks and balances between the branches. But most people say, what are you going to do about it? It is kind of difficult. It's hard to get into court. So we are somewhat hamstrung by what we can do legally. We could always unelect a few people, and you've got an election coming up. And I highly recommend unelection for quite a few of these people. Was anybody here bothered by the sight of mine-resistant vehicles and assault weapons pointed at unarmed people in Ferguson? Anybody bothered by that? There's one image of an unarmed man protesting with his hands up like this and a drawn assault weapon pointed at him from a short distance. That's not what we need in our country. In the background, there's mine-resistant vehicles, mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles. They weigh 20 tons. You know, we've given out 600 of them. The town of Dundee, Michigan has 3,000 people, and they've got a mine-resistant ambush protection. They've got one town that got 15 assault rifles, and they have one policeman in the town. I mean, just crazy stuff like this. The upkeep on these vehicles is more than the budget of most of these communities. Most communities end up just having them sitting around because they can't even pay for the upkeep of these vehicles. And the thing is that you wonder and you say to yourself, who really is in charge of this? But Senator McCaskill had a good question. She said, I see that a third of your surplus equipment is actually classified as new. I want to know if you're getting new equipment and then giving it away to cities and then replacing it with more new equipment. That sounds like maybe somebody's getting rich off the process of resupplying this equipment. But we've just it's gotten out of control, what we've done in our policing. I mean, I have a lot of good friends who are policemen or FBI agents who work in government. A lot of good people work in government. But the thing is maybe it's the rules. Maybe it's that we went crazy somehow thinking that, you know, the situation where there's a hostage taker, you want your police to be aggressive. But if someone's got some pot, do you want them to break down the door at 2 in the morning with masks and tear gas and concussion grenades? I'm okay with the police using force. I'm okay if there's a hostage and my wife's being captured. I want them to burst in and try to save her. But if there's somebody saying some kid's got pot in the house, I think it's a little crazy to have this war on drugs have gone so far. I've spent the last year trying to take the liberty message to new audiences. I think that if we take our liberty message that every individual is precious and should be defended, every individual has rights, every individual has a right to a lawyer, and also understand that the people who are getting the worst end of government, people who are getting the worst end of when police misbehave are black and brown. There happens to be more poverty in the Hispanic and the African American community, and they get the brunt of this. If you look at who's in jail for the war on drugs, it's African Americans and Hispanics. And people used to say, oh, well, they're just doing more drugs. It's not true. You look at surveys, drugs are used about the same among all the races. 80% of the people are white. How did we get 3/4 of the people in prison black or brown? Something's wrong with the war on drugs. Most libertarian people have always said this, but you know what? Keep saying this and point out to your friends who haven't been open, either the liberty message or may not have been Republican or may not have been voting for constitutional candidates. Point out to them that you're for getting rid of this and you understand what it's done to their community. The Washington Post has done a whole series on civil forfeiture. This is where the police just take your stuff. Sometimes it's your truck, sometimes it's your cash, but you're guilty until you can prove that you got your money in an innocent way. Sometimes you're not even charged. We've introduced bills to change the burden of proof to make it harder on the government to get these cases. If you're found innocent, you get your stuff back automatically. We've instituted bills to expunge your record if you had a minor nonviolent felony years ago. So many times Republicans are seen as this party, oh, We don't want black people to vote because they're voting Democrat, or we don't want Hispanics to vote because they're voting Democrat. You wonder why the Republican Party is so small. Why don't we be the party that's for people voting, for voting rights? So I testified in Frankfurt, our state capital. On one side, it was the president of the NAACP. On the other side, a longtime Democratic congressman. And I said, frankly, it's wrong. People make mistakes when they're kids. They should get a second chance. So I've been trying to promote types of legislation that I think are consistent with the liberty message, but that also reach out to new people who haven't been interested in limited government before. And we've taken this to Detroit. I've told them, frankly, look, I'm for bailing out Detroit with their own money. I'm for saying they can keep their own money. So we introduced a bill to dramatically lower taxes in Detroit for 10 years, and it adds up to $1.3 billion. Not that I'm taking from you, not that I take from Atlanta or Houston or Virginia, just money that originated in Detroit will never come to Washington, which is really a good idea with most of your money. But the bottom line is we're not winning at least the big office, presidency. We're often not winning statewide races, and we're not winning because we don't have enough people, and it's pretty simple. We don't have enough people in the group yet. So I think the liberty movement has actually been more open to receiving people of all walks of life who don't always look like you do or act like you do or have the same interests. I think we have actually been much more open sometimes than the Republican Party in general has. But it is the way you win elections. You got to have more people. And I'll end with my dad's favorite quote that I always thought was the best thing he ever had to say was, freedom is popular. Bring it on. Thanks.